Hi, I'm Michael Killen. There are great forces and trends right now occurring in our life, and they are creating business opportunities and also significantly impacting our way of life. Many of them are associated with energy and have an impact on climate change and many other things. So, I have invited Jeff Byron. He is a former California Energy Commissioner to come on this program. I'm going to ask him a series of questions to help us understand some of the great mega trends that are helping to create opportunities and maybe even threats for us. I'm going to ask him a series of questions also about his role, and I'm going to comment on my role at Stanford's upcoming Silicon Valley Energy Summit 2014. So let's get started. Jeff, how are you today?
Michael, good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And before we get into what's going to happen at Stanford on June 19th at the Energy Summit, I know you have studied some of the important energy megatrends that are going to shape our future. And maybe you could share, maybe just give me the name of 3 of them, and then I'd like to come back and ask you some questions about each one.
Sure, I'd be glad to. I think I'll start with a positive one first, because there's a couple of negative ones that we're not too keen on. But I think a good positive one is that we're definitely seeing a lot more interest in the public, not just in California, United States, but the world is much more aware of energy issues and the value of energy in our economies, and the value of it, what it costs us to generate electricity or to pull fossil fuels out of the ground. So efficiency, energy efficiency is a major trend that's taking place. And it really, California's really the home of energy efficiency. A lot of what we do moves on to federal levels and throughout the rest of the world. In fact, we had a little saying when I was at the Energy Commission, energy commissioners seem to be more highly valued the further away from Sacramento that we get.
Why is that?
Well, it's intended as a bit of a piece of humor, but we're not terribly well regarded in our home, but as we travel around the world, what California does, the rest of the world pays attention to. In fact, that's really, maybe I could tie that to a second mega trend, if you will, or
So let me be sure,
Sure.
clear. Is the first mega trend that people will continue to be more interested in energy developments? Is that no? Or is the first one there is much greater interest in energy efficiency?
I think I was trying to communicate the latter. The first one's a given. The second one, energy efficiency, if it saves money, if it allows you to be more competitive, if it gives you a distinct advantage for your business over another, or if it gives you as a residential customer more disposable income, I think the world is paying attention. That's a good thing.
So people would be more concerned with energy efficiency. I think I'm hearing you say it's a cost issue. The cost of energy, is it going to be going up? And is that why people would be concerned with energy efficiency?
That's a more complicated question because there's many different forms of energy. Some are getting more expensive, some are getting cheaper. But I think in general, the answer to your question is yes. People are interested in energy efficiency because it saves money.
Okay, good. Next mega trend.
Well, I was going to tie that to the question you asked a second ago. Then I think that there is a worldwide trend that we're using more and more energy. Despite that energy efficiency and the efforts that we do to try and demonstrate how you can actually use less to make more, if you look at the forecasts on a worldwide scale, because our population is increasing, our productivity is increasing, we are continuing to see trends where the dependence upon fossil fuel is still skyrocketing.
So I just want to repeat what you said, because of population explosion and people want to have the same kind of lifestyle as we do,
Right.
that they're, and we have more and more gadgets, I would imagine, that,
Well, and not only that, there's so many countries and so many people that don't have our gadgets who want them.
right. And you said energy demand will keep increasing, and then you made this point, fossil fuel energy. The use of fossil fuel energy will increase.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the demand for energy in China, which uses about 72% of their energy is coming from fossil fuels, within the last year or two, they surpassed the U.S. demand for energy. Okay. Over the next, by 2035, they will be using twice as much energy as the United States will at that time. And where will most of that be coming from? Well, they have the highest renewable goals in the world, but it's still going to be coming from fossil fuel for one reason: it's incredibly cheap.
Okay, so if I look out into the future, I see an ever-growing market for fossil fuel.
Yep.
Which, and that takes into consideration all sorts of new renewable energy devices and services, et cetera, that tries to dampen that, and other types of energy. But fossil fuel will keep growing, and I relate that to then the growth of greenhouse gases.
Yes.
And if you are correct that fossil fuel will keep growing and greenhouse gases keep growing, what's the end game?
Well, I'm not a climate scientist, but I'm not terribly optimistic about what we're doing to our environment. And I think you always have to have a little bit of hope. You know, the scientists do tell us that we haven't hit the tipping point yet, but it's clear we are doing irreparable harm, perhaps, to our climate. Emphasis on the irreparable. Hopefully we can mitigate this to some extent, but I think another major trend is that we're going to need to be looking at adaptation here pretty soon. The demand and the low cost and the extraction techniques for getting natural gas and oil out of the ground is getting so cheap. It's hard to imagine that the humankind is going to forego that cheap form of fuel.
Is it hard to envision that all this fossil fuel at such a low cost is going to make it extremely difficult for suppliers, entrepreneurs of alternative, clean, renewable energy to really find great markets?
Well, so this gets into the issues that our administration in Washington is dealing with right now. In fact, just this week, the President's administration introduced regulations that will be put forward over the remainder of his term to try and enact some limits on CO2 production. And I think until the United States does that, until the United States demonstrates that we're going to lead in this area, just like we have led in every other aspect of leadership in this world for the last 200 years, then it's going to be very difficult to convince India and China and the developing world to use renewables and alternative fuels instead of the fossil fuel.
Okay, now when you mention what the President did, and by the way, I know this is your life and not my life, you know, this field, so you correct me. He basically announced he's going to work at putting a cap on the emissions of power plants, you know, utilities that are burning coal, and I guess anything else that has tremendous, but are you implying something even grander has to be, grander scope in terms of capping emissions?
Absolutely.
And you have any idea when the United States would ever put a tax or a market-driven solution on fossil fuel?
Well, of course, this is what we tried to do with the passage of Assembly Bill 32 back in 2006. And we do in California have market-based approach to trying to control CO2 emissions from stationary sources. I think it's working rather well. And I think when we begin to put the cap on and start lowering that cap, I think we're going to start to see the emergence of technologies, because there'll be more of a level playing field. Fossil fuel, in this state at least, will begin to cost a little more to use. But California only emits about 1% of the world's CO2. So even though we called the bill the Global Warming Solutions Act, it was really a leadership act. And we need the federal government to follow California's lead. Now, you mentioned carbon tax. That would be my preference. But the word tax, of course, is a four-letter word.
Is carbon tax different to you or to the world than cap and trade?
Absolutely.
Cap and trade. Okay, now, you made a point that interests me, but am I losing the point? This is the first time in a few years this has happened. So, you don't know or feel when the nation would ever put a tax on the burning of fossil fuel?
I think we know realistically that's not going to happen. There was a concerted effort about 3 years ago in the administration to get a bill at the federal level, and it failed. And so the president has elected to do this through his administration, through the EPA, which they have the legal authority to do. Yeah. But what I'm saying, without getting into specifics, we need to provide that leadership for the rest of the world. Unless we do something, it's really hard for us to go to the other countries of the world and say, you need to do something.
Sure. So the president's act now of basically requiring the power plants to reduce their emissions to, I guess, 2005 levels is the substance that allows us to go to the rest of the world and the moral authority to say, you folks ought to get going on this as well.
And you know, it's not the first thing he's done. A lot of people aren't aware of this, but we passed for the first time in this country a couple of years ago, since 1988, new corporate average fuel economy standards that will reduce the CO2 output by increasing the efficiency of cars over 60% over the next 8 years. That's an enormous CO2 reduction right there. The president doesn't get a lot of credit for that, but that shows leadership as well.
Yeah, I agree. I now remember the thought I had when you were talking about costs of trying to, let's say, cap greenhouse gases. Mm-hmm. The fact that that power plants around the nation are going to have to switch to other forms of fuel to make electricity, will that raise the cost of doing business outside of the state and maybe serve as a balance so that California does not look like such an expensive place because of cap and trade? Have I been clear with my question?
Yes, but I don't think it's a fair question, because really cap and trade at this point has had a very minuscule effect on California's energy costs. Excuse me, California already has the reputation of being a difficult state to do business in, but we also have the reputation of having, you know, the best environment.
Sure.
And some of the most desirable cities to live in, and that's because we do concern ourselves with those issues. So it's clear, though, it's better if California not go alone, and I think that's what the president, he's going to do. He's going to require all the states to take action. They can create their own programs. They can join existing programs, and I'm hopeful that he's going to be successful.
Positive step. So far, did I hear 2 megatrends? There'll be increased interest in increasing the efficiency in the use of energy, and the second one
increased use of fossil fuel.
As far out into the future as we can see, we as a civilization cannot stop that trend. That would be the definition, sort of your megatrend. Do you have a third one?
How long's the show? We could talk 10.
Just give me one, and then we wouldn't even chat about it, and then we'll go on to another topic.
All right. I think, you know, I co-chair the board of the Cleantech Open, which is the world's largest accelerator of clean tech startup companies. I'm also an angel investor, and I specialize in I focus on investing in clean technologies. I think a major trend, a worldwide trend now for everybody is that whatever you do in clean tech goes through China, one way or the other. Either you have to go there for your markets, or you go there for money.
Good point. 1.7 billion people, something of that nature?
I don't think it's that big yet.
Okay. Well, it changes every. All right. It's a good market opportunity.
Yes.
And I guess everyone should start focusing more and more on that marketplace. We'll go to another subject. You and I are related in a way because we're both participating in Jim Sweeney's Silicon Valley Energy Summit 2014 on June 19th. And I'd just like to ask, what do you think of that event? How important is that Energy Summit?
Well, thank you. I'm glad you brought this up. I think first thing that Dr. Sweeney would say is that it's really the Precourt Energy Efficiency Center that's putting it on, which he directs, by the way. And it's really a group of about 12 folks that he brings together to help him to organize it. And they all volunteer their time to do this so we can put together a good program. To answer your question specifically, we try and address broad issues, topical issues, worldwide issues, but we also try and drill down on issues around energy and environment that we think will be important to people living right here in Silicon Valley.
Okay. And just share with our audience a few of the influential, very knowledgeable folks that will be speaking.
So we do have some keynote addresses. We've been very impressed, and this is really the fun part of organizing these, is to get to invite notable individuals. We'll have the former governor of Michigan, Governor Granholm will be there. We have the White House's Director of Climate Policy, and I'm drawing a blank right now on his name, but...
Oh, that's okay. Michael, okay, just
Boots.
the top.
Michael Boots, thank you.
Yes, and you have a former head of sustainability and clean tech from McKinsey.
Right, Joe Scalise will be on a panel that I'm chairing.
Yeah, and you have George Schultz.
George Schultz has agreed to come and provide us kind of the wrap-up at the end. He's very good at doing that, of kind of condensing down the main points and putting a bow on it. So he'll do that. Also, he'll be introducing Michael Boots, which is just wonderful because the bipartisanship, the nonpartisanship of it all is just great.
So you have some national speakers and people who, and isn't Dr. Chu on one of the panels?
He is. Former Secretary of Energy, Stephen Chu, who's now an endowed professor at Stanford. He'll be speaking on another panel on the question of renewables. Will renewables get us there in terms of reducing our greenhouse gases?
So this event is one of the more important events that takes a look at a lot of the developments associated with energy on a national level, regional level, and a local level. Would that be correct to say?
Yes.
And what is your panel? What is the mission of your panel?
Well, the panel that I'll be moderating is just one small part of this conference. Mine happens to be asking the question about how do the utilities, the monopoly utilities in this country, need to evolve in order to provide customers more choice. Customers that might want to be able to have access to buying 100% renewables, for instance, or looking for more energy efficiency programs that they would like to introduce, or maybe they want to do community choice aggregation. What do customers want? You know, the governor of this state set a goal about 5 years ago to build 12 gigawatts, 12,000 megawatts of distributed renewable energy. That's a big change in the way that we currently operate. What are the utilities doing to be able to put that on their system? Are they paying for that energy? These are the kind of questions that we're going to raise in our
Now,
conference.
in your group, it is looking at national trends and
Right.
requirements,
Right.
not just California.
Right, but we do have the president of the California Public Utilities Commission, Michael Peavy's agreed to be on that panel, and this gentleman's been around this industry all his life, and I'm looking forward to what he has to say.
Wow, so you're dealing with some very important topics because utilities are really fundamental to our way of life. We all rely on them. And I think I heard choice,
Yes.
consumer choice. And I think I've learned from you that there is a new bill in the Assembly that attempts to limit our choice with respect to being able to work and get our energy from local communities that may be more inclined to provide us green energy. Could you put that in perspective real quickly?
I'll try to briefly. You know, it's an esoteric subject for a lot of people, but back in 2002, our legislature, shortly after the energy crisis here in California, saw the value in providing more local control for cities and counties. So they passed a bill in 2002 that enabled community choice aggregation. Now, it took a while for everybody to understand what this is, and if I could say it in the shortest version, it's a form of municipalization. It's like having local control over where money is spent in programs, renewables, energy efficiency. As I said earlier, whether or not you want to have more of your electricity be renewables, et cetera. So we have an example of, in California, Marin Energy Authority has been in business for 3 or 4 years, and they've been a tremendous example. It's taken them a while to get that off the ground because there's a lot of resistance. You may recall one of our investor-owned utilities actually had a ballot proposition 4 years ago in an effort to put a stop to this.
PG&E?
Yes.
Okay.
And they failed. That ballot initiative was a single company that sponsored it, spent $46 million of shareholder money, and it failed. So now they're basically supporting a bill that will undo community choice aggregation before it really has a chance to get off the ground. The city of Sonoma is doing this. A number of cities are looking into this. We're looking into it here in Silicon Valley as well, and this bill will virtually kill it. So we're trying to defeat this, but it's below the radar screen of most people. Hopefully your viewers will pay attention to the subject and ask their city to speak against it.
Does Palo Alto controls its own utility?
It does.
And they do offer green energy?
It's one of the finest municipal utilities in the country.
And in terms of some of our political leaders from in this area, for example, Jerry Hill, Rich Gordon, where do they stand on rolling back some of the choice we have with respect to not having to get all our energy from the monopolies, PG&E, Southern?
I am not certain where they stand on this. I can tell you that I have had opportunity to speak with Assemblymember Gordon on this. He's my assembly member, and I believe he voted no on this bill.
Good.
And it was a difficult vote, perhaps, for him. And I hope to meet with Senator Hill in short order, and I know he's aware of this issue, and there's a number of other cities that want to meet with him. So we're very hopeful. At least our locals will vote against it, but we need to see this fail at the statewide level.
Okay. I'd like to come back to you with maybe some more questions, but first I would like to mention my role at your event.
Right.
At Jim Sweeney's event. And I was wondering if the crew would get ready to show a painting, a photo. There it is up there. My role, as I understand it from Jim Sweeney, he wants his event to provide the Da Vinci effect. Science, politics, and art. And this is a 15-foot painting called Don Quixote Meets Climate Change. And it will be on display at the Silicon Valley Energy Summit on June 19th. And not only will that 15-foot painting that taps into the story of Don Quixote to bring attention to the challenge that climate change is in front of us and energy issues. Jim is also going to display a 24-foot painting that I've made called Sustainability, which actually depicts 4 different types of renewable energy approaches, as well as a 20-foot painting,
Wow.
painting I've made called The Resilience of America, and gives an image to allow us to put concepts like sustainability into perspective. And I think about 7 other paintings, and I'm very pleased that he wants to do this.
That's
and
great. I'm glad the room will be big enough.
Yes. And what is the main benefit that Cleantech Open provides the world?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. I know there's not much time left. We think we are the largest accelerator in the world of clean tech startup companies. We help over 100 companies a year, and we help them find, foster, and fund their businesses. Cleantech Open companies, over 800 of them have been able to attract nearly $1 billion in outside funding over the last 6 years.
Interesting. And the name of your group that you're moderating, your session that you're moderating?
Well, you keep wanting to help me and plug my session. It's the evolution of the utility industry. But I guarantee you, it's only one small piece of the puzzle. There will be many excellent sessions there.
I agree. My guest has been Jeff Byron. He's a former energy commissioner of the state of California. He's a vice chair of the Cleantech Open, and he is a member of the
Band of Angels.
The Band of Angels. And both of us would love to meet everyone at the Precourt Energy Efficiency Center's Silicon Valley Energy Summit 2012 on June 19th. Search for it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. That was very good.